28 days later, the franchise that redefined the zombie genre with its raw intensity and fast-moving infected is now all set to make its powerful return with the release of its latest installment 28 years later. But before you step into theaters and get swept away by the new chapter, here are some insane facts about the franchise that should deepen your understanding of the world, help you catch those hidden references, and more importantly, show you how it changed the horror genre forever. So get ready to learn all the secrets behind every creative decision that helped the franchise become one of the most compelling and terrifying cinematic universes ever. But before we get into our list, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The birth of the Rage Virus. The overall plot of the movie revolved around the Rage Virus, but many might not know how the Rage Virus came into existence. Before the world descended into chaos, two scientists, Clive and Warren, decided to engineer an inhibitor that could suppress human aggression and help the species evolve to greater heights. Clive was a sensible and wise man and wanted to achieve their goals through ethical means, but Warren was reckless and was keen on meeting the objectives irrespective of the consequences. As a result, Warren went to extreme lengths and acquired a violent criminal as their test subject by bribing the police captain. Later, the subject became uncontrollable and the scientists were forced to kill him and hide his body. But Warren was still desperate to make their experiment a success and tried an unthinkable route. Warren took the Ebola virus as the carrier for the aggression-inhibiting compound. But nature turned against them. Ebola is known for being especially infectious, and as a result, the virus they were trying to create mutated in the wrong direction. Instead of becoming a calming agent, the virus developed into a super-contagious, hyper-violent pathogen known as the Rage Virus, which eventually went on to push the human race to its destruction. Clive immediately sensed the destructive abilities of their new creation and tried to stop Warren. Warren disagreed with Clive and planned to move ahead with it. As a result, a physical fight broke out between the two scientists, and Clive walked out of the project. But before he left, Clive made a cryptic call to an eco-terrorist group called Animal Freedom Front and shared with them everything about the Rage Virus. Filled with remorse and guilt, Clive shot himself in the head. Later, Warren also fell victim to the Rage Virus when an infected ape violently vomited blood into his face, instantly transmitting the virus and triggering his transformation. Seconds to insanity. The infected are the primary antagonists in the 28 Days Later franchise, but you might be shocked to know that once a host gets infected with the Rage Virus, it could only take them 10 to 20 seconds to lose their sanity and submit themselves to becoming a creature of pure, unfiltered aggression. Not only that, their perpetual hyper state of violence overrides all of their higher brain function, fear, logic, empathy, and even self-preservation. After the transformation, the infected are driven solely to hunt and kill any uninfected in sight. Pixels over film. Boyle's digital grit behind filming 28 Days Later. Danny Boyle chose to shoot 28 Days Later with Canon XL1 digital video cameras as he wanted the film to feel immediate, real, and unsettling. The grainy, low-resolution appearance gave the film a documentary-style urgency, which absolutely fit the chaotic post-apocalyptic theme of the story. Not only that, the camera also allowed the team to shoot quickly and secretly in the abandoned streets of London at dawn. The camera setup also fulfilled the budget constraints and relieved Boyle from the high production costs and other financial barriers they faced. Landmarks in focus. You probably loved the locations that were shown in 28 Days Later. Boyle and his crew shot most of the scenes in the city's busiest landmarks, such as Westminster Bridge, Piccadilly Circus, Horse Parade, and Oxford Street. But you might not know that the crew faced a lot of challenges while shooting the movie in such places, as it was always heavily crowded with foot traffic and vehicular traffic. As a solution, the crew started shooting at dawn. They even adopted a guerrilla-style approach where some sections of the street were closed for a few minutes, especially on Sunday mornings, as the streets always remain less crowded on that day. Apart from this, the crew only had a tight window to shoot for only 45 minutes after dawn to capture the city's gloomy and depressed atmosphere. Later, this technique became a new benchmark for directors and crews who aspired to make large-scale urban apocalypses with a confined budget. The challenges behind the gas station shoot. The The gas station explosion was a massive moment in the film, but you might be surprised to learn that it wasn't a CGI effect. The blast was a real practical stunt. All the crew members were functioning in tight coordination to prevent any accidents that could have led to unnecessary public attention and criticism. The area was largely deserted and was under redevelopment, and it was the best suited environment to pull off their fiery act. Still, every precaution was double-checked before the stunt occurred at the disused gas station near Canary Wharf in London. However, someone failed to inform the police of the whole shooting schedule, so when the explosion scene happened, the police, with multiple fire brigades, rushed to the spot to stop the sudden fire. However, the situation was under control when Boyle informed the police about their shoot. The scene was done at an estimated cost of £250,000.
He's in here!
Highly skilled professionals as infected. You might have been terrorized when you saw the Infected in the 28 Days Later franchise, but you might find it interesting that most of the Infected that were shown in 28 Weeks Later weren't all random background extras. They were trained professionals like dancers, athletes, and stunt masters. Why? Because the Infected weren't just your regular slowpoke zombies. They were fast, aggressive, and significant physical threats. So, to convincingly portray these terrifying monsters on screen, Boyle chose trained performers from these fields, as the professionals from these backgrounds regularly followed a disciplined life, had well-developed timing of movement, and always maintained high physical stamina. All of these were prerequisite traits that Boyle wanted for his version of zombies. Boyle's choice paid off well as the performers executed each leap, convulsion, and attack with great precision, intensity, and explosive energy. The inclusion of trained professionals also added a layer of constant realism and menace, which elevated the horror and tension of the movie at regular intervals. The reality of Safe Zone. If you've seen 28 Weeks Later, you'll know that after the initial outbreak, the survivors were shifted to a safe zone. The safe zone was portrayed as a heavily fortified U.S. military-controlled region known as District 1, located in London's Isle of Dogs. But in reality, the safe zone was actually the Canary Wharf business district, the most prominent financial hub of the city. In fact, some parts of the famous Canary Wharf Tower were also used in the movie. The decision to use Canary Wharf was taken because of its geographical advantage, as it's surrounded by the Thames on 3 sides. Boyle considered this place a befitting fortress for the survivors, giving the audience an illusion of security. The return of Anthony Dodd Mantle. The Academy and BAFTA award-winning cinematographer, Anthony Dodd Mantle, was the one who did the cinematography for 28 Days Later. It was his creative genius to give a magical illusion a mask of realism. But unfortunately, Anthony didn't become a part of 28 Weeks Later. But once again, he's collaborating with Boyle on 28 Years Later. Now the only thing remaining is to see if this duo can recreate the same magic that they did 23 years ago at the box office. Extending the story to France. If you've seen 28 Weeks Later, you'll know that Andy and Tammy are the only survivors left at the end. Later, Flynn airlifted them in his helicopter across London and out of infected Britain to somewhere safe in Europe. But 28 days later, Flynn's helicopter was found abandoned somewhere in France with someone calling for help through the chopper's radio. Later, in another scene, a hungry group of infected were shown rushing out of the metro exit in Paris towards the Eiffel Tower. But why did Boyle push the narrative from Britain to France? There might be multiple reasons. However, the main one could be that Boyle wanted to indicate that the virus has become a global phenomenon instead of being confined to a particular region. Boyle also might have tried to showcase an international collapse, as the virus has now affected 2 major European economies. According to fans, the virus reaching France could also have been a potential tease for the setup of the franchise's 3rd installment 28 months later. Love restarted the rage virus in 28 weeks later. The rage virus, which was believed to be eradicated after the events of 28 days later, resurfaced in 28 weeks later because of an asymptomatic carrier, Alice, who was the mother of Andy and Tammy. Alice survived the infection as she had natural genetic resistance. She carried the virus, but unlike others, it didn't turn her violent. Still, the infection was present in her blood, saliva, and other fluids. So, when Alice was brought to the safe zone, the medical team was unaware that she was a carrier. Her husband, Don, emotionally reunited with her, and both of them shared a passionate kiss. However, that moment of intimacy soon turned tragic when Don, who wasn't immune to the virus, transformed into an infected within seconds, killing Alice. Later, Dawn became the carrier of the virus, transforming many residents into a new, rapid, and uncontrollable wave of infected in the safe zone, which later created chaos everywhere. Police roadblocks to the rescue! The hauntingly empty M1 motorway scenes in 28 Days Later have a fan following of their own, but you might be surprised to know that these scenes were achieved without any use of CGI. The crew used careful planning and precise timing to land all their shots. The crew members even coordinated with police to create mobile roadblocks so that the traffic in the area became slow and the long stretches of the motorway remained clear. The infected ignore their own kind. You've seen the infected attack and feast on prey who didn't have any trace of the rage virus, but you'll never see them attacking their own kind. The reason is that the rage virus doesn't trigger territorial or cannibalistic behavior. The virus only triggers pure targeted aggression towards the uninfected. Boyle consciously made this decision so that it would heighten the terror factor of the movie, only using rage and violence as the collective force. So, if by any chance two infected try to hunt down the same prey, they ignore each other completely and maintain their focus on the target. Reusing Children of Men locations. Both Children of Men and 28 Days Later are post-apocalyptic movies set in Britain. The teams in both films used different locations in London and the countryside to shoot empty streets, military zones, refugee camps, and societal collapse. So, some might feel that Boyle reused the same locations as Children of Men in 28 Weeks Later, but that's not the case. Most of the locations used in 28 Weeks Later were from Boyle's previous works.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Infected surviving wounds. You've seen the infected receive several severe injuries while trying to hunt down their prey, but unlike humans, they survived these fatal blows. This isn't a magic trick. The rage virus induces a constant state of hyperadrenaline and aggression, providing the infected with an almost unnatural resistance to pain. In simpler terms, it means that unlike the uninfected, the infected brain is unable to process pain, fear, or survival instinct. They don't go into shock when they receive an injury, and even if their hands and limbs are broken, the infected keep on moving and hunting down their prey without treating their injuries. Creative solution for night scenes. In 28 Weeks Later, Boyle and his crew used an interesting technique known as day-for-night filming for some scenes. For those who don't know, day-for-night is a cinematography technique where the scenes are shot in broad daylight but are later transformed into night with the help of camera filters, underexposures, and post-production color grading. It's mostly done by creators when full-night scenes aren't feasible, especially for large-scale scenes such as mass evacuations, panics, or capturing the clear aerial views of the city. In some cases, filmmakers also use it to reduce the effects of CGI and boost the movie's realism. The cinematographer for 28 Weeks Later, Enrique Chediak, used blue-toned grading, desaturation, and careful exposure control to simulate dark or night in large outdoor scenes. Shelving out 28 months later. You'll be surprised to learn that 28 Months Later was planned as the sequel to the two earlier movies, but unfortunately it didn't pan out. According to sources, there were disputes between Boyle, Alex Garland, the writer of the movie, and the production houses Fox and Searchlight Pictures regarding ownership rights to the film. Therefore, the project was put on hold for several years as both the studio and creators battled it out in legal proceedings for their claim to the franchise. Another factor contributing to the project's shelving is that both Boyle and Alex were dedicated to working on new ideas for the movie's storyline, so they didn't want it to be a random sequel for cash grab purposes. Unfortunately, they couldn't find a compelling story that would have fit the rich narrative of 28 Months Later. Lastly, there was a hint that with the release of movies and shows such as The Walking Dead, World War Z, and Zombieland, the studio felt the genre was getting oversaturated and therefore felt less urgency to invest in a new zombie film.
Men go mad with watching them. There's no discharge in
the hidden objective behind the opening of 28 Years Later's trailer. The latest installment of the 28 Days franchise, 28 Years Later, has a trailer that opens up with some kids watching a Teletubbies episode on an old CRT television. But you'll be shocked to know that this wasn't a random scene. According to sources, the central idea behind such an opening was to create an image of childhood innocence in a fractured, ominous atmosphere. The visuals then sharply cut into several taglines, the most important being the 10,228 days that indicate the story has moved to 28 years later after the initial breakout. Using Teletubbies, the makers also wanted to create a juxtaposition of menace and innocence with a twisted callback to simpler times. Apart from this, according to an article, the latest installment also has a Brexit theme.
Look at what's in front of you.
use of iPhones and drones in 28 years later. As you know, Boyle is a master filmmaker who knows how to adapt with times to make his storytelling better aligned with the generation of his audience. Therefore, when he decided to move forward with 28 years later, he was determined to stick to his original guerrilla filmmaking approach, but with all of the latest technology, to make his world look even more evolved and compelling than his previous attempts. Therefore, he used iPhones to shoot various scenes of the movie to generate a raw, intimate, and immediate feel without compromising the original digital quality. Boyle not only limited himself to an iPhone for some scenes, he also used different drones to capture aerial shots of abandoned landscapes so that audiences could get a proper bird's-eye view of the unfolding outbreak. Scaring away the hikers. The shooting of 28 years later mainly took place in remote areas of Northumberland, a popular spot for hikers. To prevent random hikers from accidentally walking onto their set, the crew employed a three-legged robot. These robots emitted loud, startling noises and were strategically positioned within a defined perimeter. As a result, the hikers freaked out when they saw unexpected machines moving and jumping out from here and there during their countryside walks and trails. Even though they scared the hell out of those hikers, this bizarre idea was helpful in securing the shooting area. A brand new composer. For the music and score in 28 years later, the makers have onboarded the critically acclaimed Scottish band Young Fathers. Known for their rich blend of hip-hop, EDM, and experimental sounds, the band is expected to bring a fresh and bold perspective to the long-awaited script. However, Young Fathers has huge shoes to fill, as John Murphy's scores in the previous installments were iconic and still fresh in fans' minds. But Boyle is confident that the band will do justice with his aim to inject modern, raw, and emotionally charged energy into the film's atmosphere, which could indirectly push the boundaries of the movie's cinematic experience. Killian Murphy, the producer. Fans were desperate to see Killian Murphy's return to the franchise. However, producer Andrew McDonald confirmed that Killian is associated with 28 years later in an executive producer role only. But he still dropped a small hint that Killian's character, Jim, can be back in future installments of the franchise. But you never know. We might see a small cameo of Killian in the latest installment as well, just to satisfy loyal fans. Using optometrist. Boyle and his crew hired an optometrist for 28 days later to ensure the safety and comfort of the actors wearing the red contact lenses to portray the role of the infected. Even though these lenses looked visually striking, they had the potential to harm eyes if not handled properly. The threat was aggravated even more as the actors had to wear these lenses for long shooting hours. With the help of an optometrist, the crew could monitor the eye health of each actor with proper guidance. The optometrist also assisted in the safe application and removal of the lenses so that no actors were at risk of any long-term damage or discomfort. The inclusion of an optometrist on set reflected Boyle's deep commitment to showcasing realism and taking care of his cast's well-being. Sony acquiring the digital rights. In February 2024, a major shift occurred in the 28 Days Later franchise when producer Andrew McDonald successfully reacquired the original rights to the film. Previously, the rights belonged to Disney and Searchlight Pictures, but McDonald's well-planned move allowed his team to buy back this IP with full authority. Later, McDonald strategically used his ties and promptly sold it to Sony Pictures. This deal gave Sony an upper hand in distributing and marketing the entire franchise, including the latest film, 28 years later. Soon, Sony witnessed the buzz surrounding the trailer for 28 years later as it received an overwhelming response from the fans and critics. So, to capitalize on this, on December 18, 2024, Sony played a masterstroke and reintroduced the origin story to newer audiences by re-releasing 28 Days Later on different digital and rental platforms. This exceptional move from Sony allowed both longtime and newer fans to reconnect with the movie, which revolutionized the zombie genre almost 2 decades ago. Contributing to a good cause. As you now know that most of the locations where Boyle shot were real, similarly, the hospital scenes were also done in a real functioning hospital. The hospital operated normally on weekdays, but remained closed on weekends to provide a window for the crew to shoot their scenes without any external interference. However, the interesting part is that the rental fees for the shooting directly went to the hospital's charitable trust fund. In other words, the crew's effort to create a fictional post-apocalyptic world resulted in supporting the healthcare workers in the real world. It was also a rare incident in filmmaking history where a gruesome horror movie about societal collapse seamlessly benefited an institution devoted to healing and saving lives. This proves that horror can have a heart. A disheartened celebration. You might be amazed to learn that the celebration scenes in 28 Days Later, which were filled with warmth, laughter, and human connection between the four major characters, carry a sorrowful weight behind the cameras. According to the cast and crew, the scene was shot on September 11, 2001, one of the darkest days in Western history, as a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York resulted in a huge number of casualties and destruction. The actors performed joyful and hopeful sequences while the fire on the iconic building was still burning. When Boyle called for a cut, the actors found themselves in a deeply unsettling state and mourned for the unimaginable losses.
There are many kinds.
Marvelous conclusion! Alright guys, we've reached the end of the video, but before we sign off, we have some questions for you. Out of all the facts we shared, which one blew your mind the most and why? And, more importantly, what are your hopes, theories, or wild predictions for 28 years later? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. We'd love to hear them, and we're always looking for new ideas for videos. If you're as hyped as we are, hit that like button, subscribe, and join us as we count down to the return of one of horror's greatest sagas. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and keep your eyes peeled, because the rage is far from over. This is us signing off.